Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Apalachicola Chattahoochee Flint River Basin Drought and Water webinar for the month of October. My name's Rachel McGuire, and I'm with the Auburn University Water Resources Center located in Auburn, Alabama. If you're new to the webinar, we'll have time for comments, questions, and discussion at the end after all of our presenters have presented. Please feel free to use the question box on the GoToMeeting tool panel to type questions, or when we get to the end of the webinar, you can raise your hand by pushing the hand icon on the GoToMeeting panel. Today's speakers will be David Zierden of the Florida Climate Center at Florida State University. He is Florida's state climatologist and will be presenting our current drought status, seasonal forecasts, and outlooks for the region. We also have Tom Littlepage, branch chief of the Alabama Office of Water Resources in the Alabama Department of Economic and Community Affairs, who will be presenting the state of Alabama input. We have Paul Inghorn, a hydrologist with the USGS South Atlantic Water Science Center, who will give us our stream flow and groundwater conditions. We also have Troy Ephraim of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Mobile District to give us our current reservoir conditions for the ACF. And lastly, we'll have Jeff Dober of the NOAA National Weather Service Southeast River Forecast Center to tell us about our stream flow forecast for the ACF. With that, I'll turn it over to our first speaker, David, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. To begin today's webinar, all I can say is it's still 2020. We have wildfires in California and critical fire weather going on there, record-breaking cold temperatures in the Rockies, a disastrous ice storm occurring currently in Oklahoma and North Texas. And of course, we've got yet another potential hurricane entering the Gulf and taking aim at the eastern Louisiana coast. Just a continuation of this very active tropical season in the Atlantic Basin. This is the 27th named storm of the year. The prior record is 28 in 2005. It's the 11th storm to reach hurricane strength. The record is 15 in 2005 also. And it's the 11th named storm to make landfall in the US, which is a new record, breaking the previous record of 9 in 1916. So by some measures, it's one of the most active hurricane seasons on record in the Atlantic Basin. On the next slide, we'll take a little closer look at some of the impacts that Zeta may bring to the Southeast and the ACF Basin. It is expected to regain hurricane strength later today or overnight in the Gulf of Mexico. And over on the left shows the probabilities of tropical storm winds occurring. And we see a high probability, 50 to 60% along the Alabama coast and up into central Alabama, 40 to 50% over as far as western Georgia and parts of the ACF Basin. Now, over on the right-hand side actually shows the upper air 500 millibar chart. As Zeta approaches landfall, it's going to merge with a very vigorous upper level low, which fortunately will accelerate the remnants of Zeta on out of here very quickly, which would lead to less rainfall and less inland flooding. And over on the bottom right is the quantitative precipitation forecast from the National Weather Service showing the impact, the potential impact of Zeta as it makes landfall and moves through the ACF Basin. Very heavy rainfall again along the southern Mississippi coastal regions, a swath across central Alabama and even northwest Georgia of 3, 4, 5 inches or more. I say it is fortunate that it's going to move out quickly, so that'll keep some of the heaviest rainfall totals down. Another comment on this 5-day forecast, as this storm merges with this upper level low and becomes sheared, I have the feeling there will be a lot more rainfall east of the center than this product is showing right now. So there is the potential for multiple inches of rainfall in southeast Alabama, Florida Panhandle, and even southwest Georgia, in my opinion. So we'll move along to the next slide. Just a comment on the hurricane season. On the bottom right shows when the peak activity in the Atlantic Basin occurs, and the peak is September 10th. And now that we're into the end of October, we're really on the downslide and should see hurricane activity taper off. However, it is possible well into November. And over on the left-hand side shows the preferred formation regions and storm tracks for tropical systems occurring in the month of November. Very consistent with what's happened with Zeta forming in the Western Caribbean and then moving into the Gulf of Mexico. On the next slide, I think we'll leave this behind and start talking about drought and our rainfall. And before I do that, I want to remind us of our typical climatological rainfall during the fall season. It is the driest time of year here in the ACF Basin and the Southeast. Over on the left shows average or normal rainfall for the month of October, where we see much of the middle ACF Basin can only expect to see 2 to 3 inches during the month of October. The rest of the area, 3 to 4 inches. As we move into November, we start to see more winter and frontal rainfalls, especially to the west in Alabama. Now it's 4 to 5 inches is the climatological norm. However, over into Georgia, and especially eastern and coastal Georgia, the dryness hangs on through the month of November, where they only average 2 to 3 inches of rainfall during that month. And you can also see the dry season really setting in the Florida Peninsula, with West Florida generally receiving less than 2 inches of rainfall per month during the dry season. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at the current drought situation according to the US Drought Monitor. And we see that the ACF Basin is entirely drought-free, as is much of the southeastern United States. We see one small area of abnormally dry or D0 in western Alabama, and another spot over in eastern Georgia where deficits have started to accumulate, and they've kind of missed out on the plentiful rainfall we've seen over the last 1 to 3 months. So on the next slide, we'll look at the University of Alabama Huntsville's Lawn and Garden Moisture Index that was thoroughly explained a couple webinars ago. But anyway, it's very good at showing short-term dryness. And we see very moist areas in northern Georgia and the headwaters region. Also in South Florida, where the rainy season has refused to end, and they've had abundant rainfall over in southeast Florida. But that area of eastern Georgia really sticks out as starting to accumulate dryness and rainfall deficits. So on the next slide, we'll take a closer look at that. This is radar estimated rainfall accumulation over the past 7 days. And we had a shortwave low pressure system move through on Saturday that produced a lot more rainfall than was originally forecast. And we see that most of the ACF Basin received anywhere from 1 to 2 to close to 3 inches in some locations from this system. So very plentiful rainfall last weekend in what is a dry time of the year. And also in South Florida, you see the really torrential amounts of 10 to 15 inches or more along the southeast Florida coast. On the next slide, we'll take a look a little further back at the last 30 days, and it's much the same story. You see that area of less rainfall over eastern Georgia, only 1/2 inch to 2 inches at most over that area that's currently D0 on the drought monitor. But we also see the plentiful rainfall in the headwaters region and across central Alabama, and of course the Florida Panhandle. On the next slide, we'll look even further back, and now this is rainfall departures from normal, not totals. but it really tells the story where the entire ACF basin is much above normal rainfall over the past 3 months. That same area in eastern Georgia shows some areas below normal, others near normal over the past 90 days. And of course, the Florida Peninsula is also well above normal. So on the next slide, we'll start looking ahead. I already showed the 5-day quantitative precipitation forecast. So here I showed the mid-range forecast for week 2, or the 8 to 14-day range from the Climate Prediction Center. And what it shows is, over on the left is the temperature forecast, which with pretty good chances of normal to near normal temperatures, with the exception being the Florida Peninsula, where they should see above normal temperatures in week 2. But over on the right, it shows the precipitation forecast with strong likelihood of below normal precipitation over much of Alabama, northern Georgia, and certainly points to the west of it. So it looks like, looking at the models, that after Zeta moves through, a cold front's going to push through and clear things out across the southeast. Then we're going to get a reinforcing front on Sunday that'll keep things cooler and certainly dry over all of next week. So on the next slide, we'll start taking a look at the seasonal forecast. And of course, we will look at the Pacific Ocean, where La Nina is in place and is really going strong. This graph shows the sea surface temperature departure from normal. You see a very broad area of strongly negative anomalies along the equator and to the south, really the signature of a very mature and La Nina episode that can now be classified as a strong La Nina. And if we look at the Nino 3.4 index below, we see that it's now approaching that negative 1.5 degrees Celsius over that region, which is the commonly accepted threshold for a strong La Nina. So it looks like we're going to have a strong La Nina in place as we go through the fall and into the winter season. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at the subsurface temperatures. This is an equatorial cross section showing ocean temperature departures from normal at depth. And we see over the entire central and eastern Pacific, there's plentiful colder than normal water below the surface, supporting the continuation of these La Nina conditions. So with that, we'll look at the forecast. Over on the left is the official NOAA IRI consensus forecast, and shows high probability of La Nina continuing this fall, over 90%, and there's even an 85% chance that it'll continue through the winter and into the spring months. And over on the right-hand side is the model plume, where all the models show that we should be, all except one, show that we should continue to be in La Nina conditions for sure over the next 1 to 3 months, and certainly into the winter and even into the spring. And also the consensus from these models do show that we enter the threshold of being a strong La Nina. So on the next slide, we'll start looking at some of the implications. Over on the right is our conceptual model of how it affects our jet stream and climate patterns, kind of a amplified polar jet stream that with the storm track up the Mississippi Valley, but that leaves the southeast and the ACF basin usually warmer and drier during the winter months. And with this, one thing we struggled with past La Ninas is just where does that storm track with enhanced rainfall set up, and where is the transition zone, and how sharp is the transition zone? And could that storm track actually include the headwaters region of the ACF? To answer that question, I made a composite of seasonal rainfall over on the left. This is November through March rainfall, where I made a composite of all the other strong La Ninas that hit that negative 1.5 degree threshold. And they're listed at the top. But this composite of all the strong La Ninas show that the drier conditions, the below normal rainfall, extends up through pretty much the entire state of Georgia and doesn't include the headwater region. So judging by this, I don't think we can count on any enhanced rainfall anywhere in the ACF basin, and we should be anticipating drier than normal conditions through the next 3 to 5 months. So with that in mind, we'll go to the next slide and take a look at the official NOAA seasonal outlook for the months of November, December, January. On the left-hand side is the temperature outlook that shows pretty strong chances of above normal temperatures across all the southern and central United States. Over on the right is the precipitation forecast, which is now showing increased chances of below normal rainfall throughout the entire states of Florida, Alabama, and Georgia, and the ACF basin. So we'll go to the next slide, which wraps us up with the seasonal drought outlook. And this is an interesting product this go around. They're actually showing that drought development is likely across the Florida Panhandle, southern Georgia, and parts of the ACF basin. And that's a strong forecast for this product, because usually they don't forecast drought as likely if some form of drought isn't already in place. And as we'll see throughout this webinar, the ACF basin is in really good shape right now hydrologically, yet we still have a forecast that drought development might be likely. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up with my summary points. We're still in the middle of we're winding down towards the end of a near record Atlantic hurricane season. Zeta to bring heavy rainfall to the middle and upper ACF basin, and perhaps even more widespread. There are some pockets of abnormally dry or D0 in western Alabama and east central Georgia. However, the ACF basin itself is drought free. We did receive 1 to 2 inches of rainfall widespread from a short wave disturbance last Saturday. Most of the ACF basin is well above normal at 30 to 90 days. The only exception is the eastern Georgia spot. We are currently under a La Nina advisory. There is an 85% chance of this now strong La Nina continuing through the winter and into the spring season. The CPC seasonal forecast favors above normal temperatures and below normal rainfall for the region. And while in the short term, the ACF basin is likely to remain drought free, but we need to be on the watch for the onset of drought as the La Nina dry and warm pattern sets in.
Thank you, David. And now I'd like to turn it over to Tom Littlepage with the State of Alabama input. Whenever you're ready, Tom.
Yeah, go ahead. Next slide. So basically, I think David set us up with a good overview, and what we're going to see here in Alabama is a continuation for this season. We have been very fortunate from a drought standpoint. Obviously, on the other end of the spectrum with regards to extensive rainfall and flooding with Hurricane Laura and Hurricane Sally, we've seen the opposite, especially in the coastal counties of Alabama. And in this map, what we're hearing from this week's author, Dave Miskus, is that the D0 will probably go away here, and potentially another spot will be added a little lower in western Alabama, may introduce a little bit of D0, but nothing more severe than that. So while we've been fortunate from a drought standpoint, the La Nina perspective that David gave is a very good one, and one we're watching closely. Next slide. So this is our current drought declaration for the state, and based on the fact that both the current conditions and the forecast are not showing extensive amounts of drought predicted, and we're not seeing any impacts, we continue to show this as no drought. And basically, we had a MIG meeting on October the 20th, and we chose to continue this level of no drought across the state. Next slide. But we are continuing to monitor conditions, and I just want to remind everyone that We put updated conditions out on our website, and if you, between these meetings, if you need to get some more current information, please feel free to check our website. Thank you. Next slide. So in summary, 2020 from a precipitation standpoint has been good, especially for the northern 2/3 of the state. It's been very, very good, productive for agriculture. Obviously, we've had time periods of extensive rainfall that was very detrimental. As I alluded to in our MIG meeting that was held a week or so ago, we chose to continue the declaration at the current level. But this emphasis of La Nina, as Dr. Christie, our state climatologist, continues to remind us, La Nina has its most significant impact in the lower part of Alabama and even on the lower ACF during the spring cycle. So given the intensity that the current conditions are based on what David showed and the forecast for it to continue at least through the spring, it's going to be something we are watching very carefully as we prepare for next summer. Again, we're not having any issues with water availability, but we are continuing to watch things. Next slide. And based on the fact that the conditions are showing at this point relatively good conditions, we have decided to not formally schedule a meeting now. We're going to continue to monitor, and then at the call of our MIG chair, we'll schedule the next meeting. And those are published, those notices are published on the Alabama Open Meetings Act website if you ever would like to know, or you certainly can email us. Thank you. I think that's the last slide. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Now I'd like to turn it over to Paul Inghorn with our stream flows and groundwater conditions. When you're ready, Paul.
All right. Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. So we'll begin by looking at the real-time network as of yesterday morning. And so not a lot of change from our last webinar, but you can see from the image on the right here, we are well primed for some flooding with the anticipated rain from Zeta. So the ACF, is looking good, but a majority of the sites right now are showing above normal flow, as indicated by the blue and light blue pixels there, with some stations that are actually showing high flow. So we have plenty of water resources in the ACF as well as the whole Southeast for that matter. So next slide, we shall look at, this is an indication of hydrologic drought. This is the below normal 7-day average stream flow. So as you can see, and it has been pointed out, the ACF Basin is drought free at the moment. Last webinar showed some portions of Alabama that were abnormally or below normal. Those have been removed, and there's just a small area in Georgia on the Ogeechee Basin that is showing below normal, but ACF right now, hydrologically speaking, is drought free. The next slide, we'll look at, this is the 28-day average stream flow. That's the black bold line there, and the other data that's shown are the historic 28-day average for the period of record. So this is Lake Lanier inflow, and as our two main tributaries, Chattahoochee River, Cornelia, and Chestatee River, both currently ranking much above normal, where the Lanier, Chestatee River there is right at the 95th percentile, and Cornelia there is pretty much maxed out, statistically speaking, with regard to historic record. Next slide. Let's look at, this is Lanier outflows. So statistical record there has been broken, Chattahoochee River at Atlanta. As you can see, that 28-day average flow now has surpassed the 99th percentile, and so that's a new peak for Chattahoochee at Atlanta. And Whitesburg is right at the 99th percentile, so much above normal flows for 28-day average. Next slide. These stations are further downstream, and both Chattahoochee at West Point and Columbus are both showing 28-day average flow to be right around the 95th percentile, so much above normal. Next slide, we'll take a look at the Flint River. So Flint River as a whole compared to the Chattahoochee is showing a little less water, but right now Ripon and Carsonville are right on the border between the much above and normal, above normal. So we're right at the 90th percentile for both those stations. Next slide, we'll move further downstream to Albany and Bainbridge, where both stations there have moved well into the above normal range. And then the next slide, this will show the data at Apalachicola River at Chattahoochee. And since the last webinar, the flows have 28-day average flow at least has decreased somewhat. I mean, it's still high, but we're showing the data to be right at the above normal 90th percentile. Okay, so that's surface water. Now groundwater, the image on the right is our current brief, and the database, from what I gathered, is going through some upgrades at the moment. So I ended up having to pull the entire groundwater network. And so a lot of these stations, the squares and the triangles are they're continuous, but they are not real time. So some of the data there are probably lagged. But what we're looking at is the real-time stations that are circled in red there, and those are our two reference sites. So we'll begin by looking at Miller County. So I pulled the real-time data on the left there. This is straight off NWIS. And so the current well elevation or depth below land surface is 31.38 feet. So if you take a look at the right graphic, which is the statistical ranking, you'll see that we're right in the above normal range at 31.4 feet. So next slide, that shows Doherty County. So I did the same thing here. So right now the well depth is 24.1 feet below surface. And so when you rank that on the right there, that should also be right in the above normal. So both wells are in the above normal range. All right, so I'll just give a quick summary here. So real-time stream flow for the basin are currently in the high to below normal range. The ACF basin is currently ranked as normal with regard to 7-day average stream flow. 28-day average stream flow for the Chattahoochee River currently ranked from much above normal to normal range, with a new record at the Chattahoochee River at Atlanta. And then the 28-day average stream flow for the Flint currently in the above normal range. And then real-time groundwater levels for the basin range from normal to high, with majority of stations in the normal range. All right, Rachel, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And now we'll see if Troy Ephraim was able to join us for our reservoir conditions. He was traveling. I'll give him a second to come on. If not, I'll share the information with you. All right, so I was notified by Troy that they are lowering pools at all projects ahead of the potential threat of Tropical Storm Zeta later this week. And the current elevation for Buford Dam is 1,071.69 feet. West Point's current elevation is 636.8 feet. Walter F. George elevation 185.9 feet. And Jim Woodruff elevation 77.58 feet. And their composite conservation flood storage is currently in zone 1. Inflows into those projects are normal. Lanier and West Point are both operating above their guide curve. Walter F. George has been drawn down to elevation of 186 feet, for those upstream repairs on the dam that have been occurring over the last couple of months. As I mentioned before, projects will be returned to guide curve after they are dropped for Tropical Storm Zeta coming in the next couple of days. And the conservation storage is forecasted to remain in Zone 1 for the next few weeks. Now I'll turn it over to our last speaker, Jeff Dober, with our Streamflow forecast. Whenever you're ready, Jeff.
Sure, great, thanks, Rachel. So here's our November forecast, and overall the forecast for the next month is relatively easy this time around, and that's because, as Paul pointed out, the stream flows for the ACF are running above to well above normal right now, and that trend is likely going to continue. On top of that, the likely tropical system. On top of that, as Rachel pointed out, Troy slides, that inflows are running high, as well as reservoir pools are above guide curves at a lot of locations, and this is the time when they start to drop their pools as we go into for their wintertime pools. So there's a lot of water in the system. And in fact, when we go back and we look at historical analogs for the month of October into November, when we have stream flows above normal in October, in almost all occasions, the stream flows are above normal going into November when they're above or well above normal. Usually November almost always ends up above normal for the month of November. And this is most likely because the temperatures are cooling, evapotranspiration rates, our canopy, we're just getting more efficient rainfall runoff, and for a number of reasons. And so our stream flow forecast for November calls for above normal stream flows across the entire ACF watershed. So if we go to the next slide, which is our 3-month forecast, and this includes our ensemble stream flow prediction pie charts, which are heavily based on current soil conditions. And that's why right now they're indicating for the 3 months that the greatest probability is for above normal stream flows. As you can see there, roughly 40 to 50% probability that we're going to be above normal through the 3-month period. And then, roughly about 30 percentile range for near normal. And then, of course, a very small chance right now to being below normal. It's about a 1 in 10, 1 in 5 chance right now for locations to be below normal as we work into the middle of winter. With that being said, we're actually going with near normal, and
Hey, Jeff, I think we lost your audio.
this is because we're probably going to be above normal in the early part of this period, of course, November. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So yeah, I don't know if you heard me before, but overall, we're running high right now. But as David pointed out, with the La Nina conditions, we should see some drying as we push into the holiday period into December, and that's why we're leaning toward most likely a near normal ACF probably by the end of the year. But there will be this transition period of going from above normal and well above normal stream flows in November to coming back down towards normal conditions again by the end of the year. So that's our stream flow forecast. I did have a couple other slides to share with you, and I thought these would be of interest to everybody out there. This is the November ACF percent runoff from the HUC 6 USGS runoff data. This is the runoff from stream flow for all of November's going from 1960 through 2018. What we did is we compared the actual runoff from stream flow for each year for the month of November to the average runoff over that roughly 60-year period, 58-year period. And you can see The yellow shade there is roughly sort of what we would call not a normal range, but sort of a normal range for the stream flows. And one thing that we thought was interesting is if you look back over the last roughly decade or more, we've really have had extremes. We've either been have seen stream flows running relatively well below normal or well above normal. So I thought I'd share that with you. And that's, if you look back in the 60s and 70s, you see a lot of the bar graphs in that yellow range which would be more in a reasonable normal level. So we thought that was interesting. And this next slide here is, as David pointed out, he showed you the composites of rainfall for La Nina years. And these are the composites of stream flows for La Nina years. And as you can see, during La Ninas, typically October, most of the pie charts there, these are the probabilities, again, similar to the ESP, the probabilities I showed for the 3-month. These are the probabilities of the stream flows falling into these different ranges, whether it be above, near, or below normal. And you can see, for the most part, October is a throw, it's pretty much 30, 30, 33, 33, 33, an equal chance at any of the levels in the ACF there, if you look at those particular pie charts. And for most of the Southeast, with the exception of North Carolina. Now, as we go into November, the next slide, we see a little bit of that dryness. Now we see, when we look at those analog years, we see there's slightly higher probabilities toward below normal stream flows, especially across, as David sort of as it matches David's composite graphics across South Alabama, South Georgia, Central Georgia, and into South Carolina. And then by December, we see the signal even stronger. If you go to the next slide, we see the signal even stronger across most of the Southeast. Now, as you can see, the pie charts aren't solid red. There have been some years where we ended up with La Nina conditions and be actually above normal. But the best probabilities show that we're going to be below normal, and that's why we're hinting at the near normal stream flow conditions by the end of the year across the ACF. And that's all I have. Here's the summary again. Yep.
Can go back to that slide. How much of those systems are regulated? It looks like there's a lot of regulated basins.
Well, there are that does come into some play of it, but when we look, it's probably, when we do this data, we sort of it's all relative to itself. So and that's why some of these, I think for this particular data, I might have started in 1950 and ran it through 2010. So some of the reservoirs, those early years, they might have been post 1950. But for the most part, I think this should represent what we're saying. But yeah, of course, the core reservoirs, but there's still a maintenance of water through the system. And again, it's all relative. These pie charts are all relative.
Yeah, thank you.
To themselves. So yeah, above normal, 1 month stream flow, 3 month stream flow forecast above normal early, becoming near normal. So we'll see how this La Nina builds in as we head into the winter.
Thank you, Jeff. That was interesting. So we have one new thing this month before we delve into any questions. We have a survey about the ACF webinar. It's not lengthy, I promise. It's about a 2 to 3 minute survey, depending on how much you want to say. I'm going to post a link to the survey in the chat, but you can also use your smartphone to scan the QR code that's displayed on the right side of your screen, and I'll include it in the recap email. If you don't want to take it right now, there'll be ample opportunities to take it. But please do take some time, whether this is your first webinar that you're attending, or if you're one of our regulars we see every month, regardless of current drought conditions. It's a great way to help us find out how to tailor this webinar to all of your needs and interests. The series has been held for 10 years now, and we want to make sure that we're providing the information that everybody needs. So thank you in advance for taking that survey. And now I do want to open up the floor for any questions that we have for our presenters. You can type your question in the question box, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you to ask your question.
Hi, this is Chris Manganello. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I lost all of, I couldn't hear anybody for a minute there. So yeah, I just have kind of a comment, unfortunately, of something I wanted to ask Troy, but I don't know if everybody else is aware. The Corps has a series of maintenance projects, I guess they're working on at Lake Lanier, and they actually, in order to do the maintenance, they're gonna have to drop the lake to 1069. So on top of all this water in the basin right now, and all the water that's coming, the Corps had intended, I think, to begin that lowering project to get to 1069 sometime this month or next month. So I obviously, because they're nowhere near that, they're not going to be able to do the work. So I don't know how that's going to all play into this as we move forward. But for folks who didn't know that, I just thought I would share that. And unfortunately, we can't hear from the Corps. But thanks anyway.
Thanks, Chris. I can let Troy know about that, and hopefully he can maybe address that, give us a little more information next month, since it sounds like they may have to postpone their original lowering plan.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Is there a web link that explains the work that they're going to be doing?
I can, yeah. What I'll do is I'll drop a press release link into the chat box. It simply says that they're going to lower the elevation to get to 1069 for some headgate repairs. So that's all I know.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Thanks, Chris. And if you put that link in the chat, I can also share that in the core section of our recap emails for those of you who'd like to read more. Do we have any other questions? Okay, if we don't have any other questions, then I'd like to thank all our speakers. Once again, we have David Zierden of the Florida Climate Center, Tom Littlepage of the Alabama Office of Water Resources, Paul Ankhorn of the USGS South Atlantic Water Science Center, Jeff Dover of the Southeast River Forecast Center, and Troy Ephraim of the Army Corps of Engineers Mobile District provide us with reservoir information. Our next webinar will be Tuesday, November 24th, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. There will be a recording of this webinar posted online on the NIDIS YouTube channel, and you'll receive a recap email within 48 hours with a summary of the information provided in today's briefing. Thank you everyone for being here today.
Thank you, Rachel.